Hi everyone, my name is Laura McEachen, and if you haven't worked with me before, I'm the grant coordinator with Support Kansas City. I've had this position for about 3 years, and when I'm not writing grants, I am a family law attorney. So I utilize persuasive writings in both careers. And I'm glad you could join me to discuss how to find potential grant funders today. I'm going to talk about some websites. If they are not on the current slide that I'm showing, I have made a list of all the websites on the last slide for you, so you don't have to worry about trying to write them down. And I know we probably have a wide range of folks with us today in terms of their grant writing experience. We may have some that haven't written grants before, and we may have some that have been doing it for a lot longer than I have. So if anybody has feedback, ideas, questions, I look forward to hearing from you after the talk. So I'm going to go right into this, and we're going to talk a little bit about, is your organization grant search ready? And that just means you have to have some basic things in place before you can think about adding grants to your revenue stream. And we're just going to talk a little bit about these organizational, programmatic, and financial things that are basics before you're at that beginning phase. It's a much larger discussion as to whether you're grant ready, but I'll go over some of these basic ideas here. Organizationally, at a minimum, most grant funders will require you to be incorporated and have articles of incorporation and to have received tax-exempt 501c3 status. You need to have a board of directors. Ideally, this is more than one person and someone that is not a family member. You need to have a clear mission statement. It's also good to have a vision and a purpose codified. You also want to have a GuideStar profile. This is how funders are going to fact check you, make sure that you are a legitimate organization, and find out more about you. And some funders even require that. So that's a really important first step before you want to start applying for grants. Other good things to have before you start the process are a website and a social media presence. It doesn't have to be huge, but funders do like to see that there is something there. It's also good to have an email address for your organization that is not your personal email address, and same for a mailing address. Even if it's a PO box, you want a mailing address for your organization that is not your personal residence address. With regard to the program side, you need to have a program before you can get a grant. And I know that sounds difficult because how do you fund a program without a grant? It's kind of what comes first, the program or the grant. The program needs to come first. You have to have good programs that are already operating. And it's best to wait to ask for funding for any new programs unless you already have a steady, diversified revenue stream for your existing programs. You need to have a very clear description of what your programs are and what key staff members or volunteers are in charge of those programs, what resources they require, and how you will evaluate those programs. You need to clearly think through how you're going to measure outcomes. Outcomes are very important to funders. They have to be measurable, such as how many people were served or how much time was given back to the community. And these need to be backed up with data. And if you don't have proven outcomes yet, you need to collect this data and summarize the results before you are ready to search for grants. You also need to collect data about the community you're serving, the very specific demographics that you serve, and the positive change that you want to see. What are your goals? and you'll need to know this data about the community you serve for the statement of need or the problem statement in grant applications. Finally, your finances. You need to have an overall agency budget, preferably going back at least a year, as well as a specific program budget for each program if you run more than one. You'll need a recent tax return, Form 990, a record of your other funding sources, including in-kind, donations, volunteer hours, and a ballpark budget would be more than around $20,000 annually, kind of for that benchmark to first start applying to grants. If your budget is less than this, you need to build up your financial capacity by individual donors, fundraisers, in-kind contributions, whatever that may be to get you over that benchmark. So one of the first things we're going to talk about now that you've determined whether or not you are grant search ready is online funder databases. And these are complex tools. I'm not going to go into how to navigate through each one today. I'll talk a little bit about the main ones, how you can access them, what their advantages and disadvantages are. Database searches are useful at the beginning. You want to find foundations that align with your funding goals, with your geographic area, and with the target demographic that you serve. They are useful for finding smaller foundations that may not have an online presence. Rather than just a Google search, you're going to get more information about the funder, typically from these online funder databases. The most well-known is Foundation Directory Online, which is abbreviated FDO, and that's how I'm going to refer to it. This directory was purchased by Candid, who also operates GuideStar. So Candid has the funder side as well as the nonprofit agency looking for grants side with GuideStar. Other popular databases are GrantStation and Instrumental. In addition to containing funder databases, these companies also provide a lot of really good educational resources. Many are free. On the last slide is a link to FDO's free course, Introduction to Proposal Writing. That's a good one for anyone who is just getting started or needs a refresher on what's included in a grant proposal. Foundation Directory Online costs about $400 a year plus tax, and that's for their most limited subscription level. But you can access it for a lower cost or even free at a few places. So places to access the online databases other than a direct subscription. You can access FDO and GrantStation at the Kansas City Public Library, at the central location downtown on 10th Street, or at Johnson County Public Library at the Central Resource Library on 87th Street. And for both of these, you do have to go to the library in person, and they are usually very helpful there about helping you access the database in their online system. Another way to access the funder databases are through Nonprofit Connect. If you are not a Nonprofit Connect member, I would suggest taking a look at what their membership offers. It's about $150 per year to become a member, and that increases a little bit depending on the size of your organization measured by your income. You will get free access as a Nonprofit Connect member to Foundation Directory Online and GrantStation. And when you purchase a membership with them, you can have a separate individual login for each member of your staff as well as each member of your board. So this is a really good way for your staff and board to assist with the grant writing process. They have their own login. They can go to these large funder databases and run some searches for you. Also, there are some publication subscriptions that will give you access to the online databases. For example, subscribing to the Chronicle of Philanthropy online is only $110 a year, and this gives you free access to GrantStation. Going to take a look a little bit at what you see when you go into Nonprofit Connect and go on to Foundation Directory online. This is what's going to pop up. These are the categories that you will see. These are 9 databases that are available to search. You click on one of those, search through the list, and you can click on a funder to see the details. If you select that top one, all funders, local and national, you're going to get 61 pages of foundations with about 100 foundations per page, so 6,100 funders. If you choose all local funders, that middle one there, you'll get about 24 pages of foundation names or about 2,400 funders. Obviously, you are going to probably want to narrow that down. So the first way to narrow it down is by interest or subject matter area. And this shows you under the local funders what those subject areas are and how many funders they have under each section. You can narrow your search further by selecting from population served, the city of the funder, the state of the funder, and the most recent average low grant and most recent average high grant. So using a funder directory is not going to give you active solicitations for grants. It's going to give you information about the funder. And then you're going to have to take that information to contact the funder, find out more, and see what type of grants and when they are accepting applications. And we'll talk a little bit now about what characteristics do FDO and GrantStation share, how are they different. One feature many users like about FDO is that it allows you to see where funders are funding visually on a map. This is really helpful to find funders who fund regionally. There are some funders that fund, for example, 6 states in the Midwest. And if you were just doing a Missouri or Kansas search, you may not come across them because they're headquartered in a different state, but they do still fund in Missouri and Kansas. GrantStation costs about $7 a year or $58 a month, but you can often find discounts on that. GrantStation's database does include programs from the US and Canadian government, including state government. So on the last slide, I've given you a link to a GrantStation tutorial on YouTube. If you're interested in finding out more about learning how to use GrantStation, that's a good place to start. The main relevant search categories on GrantStation are going to be US charitable, US federal, and US state government. You can then refine those searches by state, by subject area, by funder name. You can also access the GrantStation Insider. That's their weekly newsletter for free without being a subscriber. That has some detailed description of open funding opportunities. And on the last slide is also a link to a tutorial about how to use the Foundation Directory online. And keep in mind, again, these are funder directories. These are not grant opportunity directories. You can find some opportunities through Philanthropy News Digest, which is part of FDO. And a link to that is also on the last slide. If you're wanting to search open funding opportunities, you're going to want a database that's geared toward that particular type of search. And this slide is going to show us a little bit more about how some of the major databases compare. Instrumental is the main one that I work with that focuses on active RFPs, active grant applications or opportunities, and you can search those by date when they're due. So if you want to see what can I apply for in October, that is a good one to work with. Instrumental also monitors funder websites. So if there are changes to a grant ask, such as a shift in the deadline or something, it's going to flag that and let you know. Instrumental is probably the most expensive. It's about $150 a month, but it does offer a free 14-day trial. Most of these databases let you save your search results, let you export them. So if, for example, you're accessing them at the library, you can export all of your results in PDF to your own email to go through and have back at your office. As you get familiar with who the major funders are, you're going to find yourself doing less funder database searching, and you'll get more use from looking up the individual funders on their website or contacting them directly. But it is a good place to start your grant search, just to narrow down who is funding in this area in your subject matter. The next thing we're going to talk about is how you can utilize your board, your volunteers, your other stakeholders to find grant funding. If your board is not already playing an active part in your fund development, other than making a direct financial contribution, this needs to change. Grant funding, fund development shapes your entire organization, and to not have your board involved in this is a barrier to them acting fully in their capacity as board members. So I very much encourage everyone to involve your board members in fund development. I know that's easier said than done, but if you don't have a fund development committee, go ahead and start one of those. You can also have a specific subcommittee for grant prospect research and get them onto Nonprofit Connect, get them their own login, and they can spend some time searching these databases for you. When you have board members, they most all have or used to have employers. If they or their spouse work for a mid-size or larger company, that company likely offers grants or other philanthropic giving. Your board members probably have a bank or a credit union for themselves individually or for their own business. And to get in the door for grants with a bank, you usually need a bank employee to sponsor you. So you want to utilize your board's relationships with area banks and credit unions so you can get that bank-sponsored grant funding. Board members attend places of worship, churches, synagogues, other religious organizations are a great source of grant funding, especially if they're located in the area that you serve. Your board members are likely active in other philanthropies. Find out which ones, find out what they do there. There may be grant opportunities here, things like Junior League, Rotary, all of those provide grant funding. And if you already have a member on your board, you're that step closer to getting a grant. And don't limit these kinds of things to board members. You can ask for similar information from your core volunteers, your stakeholders, your other collaborators or partners. Another important role that your board members are going to play is the relationships. Find out who your board knows at a foundation or corporation that you're asking for a grant from. You can pull up a foundation's board of directors on their website, on GuideStar, or you can go directly to their 990. All 990s are required to list the names of the board of directors, and you can just Google the name of the foundation with 990 and you'll be able to get that information. A phone call or an email to a foundation board member can have a very positive effect on your grant application. By building these connections to grant makers over time, you will slowly increase your success rate when it comes to grants. Unlike national or government grants, relationships are very important in these local community foundation funding. Anytime your board member or staff goes to a fundraiser or public event, have them bring in the program or the list of sponsors. If they're at a ribbon cutting, take a picture of the names on the wall. These are going to tell you who is giving out money right now. And sometimes that's more important than whether there is alignment. You'll see who has the money to give. Other ways your board is important for grant funding. Almost every grant application is going to require the applicant to provide detailed information about their board of directors. And you don't want to run the risk of being denied an application because your board is too small, is only made up of family members, is inexperienced, or it lacks diversity. And grant proposals often require that you share the percentage of board members who contribute financially to your organization. And if this is anything less than 100%, that's a red flag to the funder and it could hurt your chances. So that is how to use your board members to help you get some grant funding. Next, we're going to talk about finding those foundation funders in your community. Kansas City is a wonderful philanthropic community. The Greater Kansas City Community Foundation is one of the largest community foundations in the country. They are great to work with. You can get individual information on local funders, a description of their upcoming opportunities. I highly recommend that you look them up and start a conversation with some of their staff on how they can best help you in your funding search. They're really great to work with. Nonprofit Connect has a webinar with more information on Greater Kansas City Community Foundation, and that link is on the last slide. Nonprofit Connect also provides a calendar each month called their Foundation Link Grant Deadline Calendar. This is found under the Resources tab once you go in the membership section of Nonprofit Connect. I typically search it by the most recent date. That's going to get it to you the most quickly, but it's also helpful to go back to previous months to get an idea as to what's coming up. And this is typically those funders that have a set grant cycle. Every year their grant is due in February, for example. So you're going to be able to see kind of an annual calendar of what's coming due when. The Jewish Community Foundation funds a number of different nonprofit areas. Not all of them have to have ties to the Jewish community. Bank of America manages a number of local foundations through their Missouri office here. You can see that complete list of foundations at that link. You can also search all the foundations that they manage nationwide, and that link is on the last slide. Another good way to get a handle on local funders is to subscribe to the Independent. I don't know if you're familiar with this. It's Kansas City's Journal of Society. They also have this at the library if you don't want to subscribe, but it is really going to give you good information about what other nonprofits are doing and who is funding them. And there are often acknowledgements after an organization has a fundraiser that will list all of those sponsors. And that's a really good way to see, again, who is giving out money right now and what they're giving it to. Now we're going to switch to local government funders. The best thing I can recommend about local government funding is to monitor your local city and county government websites. Sign up for their emails, sign up for their newsletters, check them out once every month, once every couple of weeks or so, and that's where you're going to see opportunities for funding at the local government level. GrantStation is also an easy way to search for state government funders. So that is another resource that you have in terms of local government. Finally, we're going to talk just briefly about locating corporate grant opportunities. I'm sure all of you are familiar with just Googling a corporation's website and looking at those pages. Most large companies have a separate page on their website about corporate responsibility, philanthropy, that will discuss their donations and grants. You may have to go to their company profile or about page, but you can usually find that. And rather than starting with large national corporations, if you're just getting started on your corporate funder list, I would start with large companies that are headquartered in Kansas City. There's a list of some of them here on this slide. There's a website, thinkkc.com. It lists corporations. You can search them by what type of business they are. And what you want to take away from corporate funders is that they can provide a lot of support in addition to money. They can sponsor an event. A lot of them prefer to do that rather than just give a grant because it gets their name out there, gets them some advertising. They can provide you with pro bono services, corporate professionals that offer their expertise to you for free. They're good about doing matching gifts that can really help a fundraising campaign if you have a corporation that's going to match individual donors. They like to provide volunteers. And finally, in-kind gifts are an important thing that you can ask for from corporations. Instead of asking money to buy the items, why don't you just have them donate the items if that's something that they do? Another subscription that is helpful is Ingram's magazine that has all the information about local and regional businesses here in Kansas City, Kansas, and Missouri. And again, that's going to tell you who's up and coming, who's giving out money, who is engaged in the philanthropic community as far as businesses. So that is everything that I have to talk about as far as how to find funders today. I know it's a ton of information. It's a broad topic. Here are those links. This will be in the slide presentation that you'll receive for registering. And now I will turn it over to any questions. Thank you.